Sthiti Prakarana, The Sustenance. Chapter 1, The Story of Shukra. After covering nearly 8 kilometers on the asphalt road with lush paddy green fields on both sides, the bus stops at the foot of the hill for allowing some of the passengers to get down and continue its journey to Kanyakumari, the land's end. The hill, or rather hillock, is named Marutwamalai, the medicinal hill, after the mountain carried by Hanuman with Sanjeevani to revive Lakshmana, who had been fatally injured by Indrajit, the son of Ravana. It is claimed by the local people that a portion of the mountain had fallen. For persons unused to trekking and mountainous tracks, it is quite a strenuous climb. The hill, which is otherwise quite bald, has bushy growth consisting of thorny plants, and some of these plants, it is claimed, do have some medicinal qualities. For about 400 feet, there is a cobbled path leading to a small temple, and from there on, there is no regular path, and one has to follow one's own instincts to reach the top through gorgeous, thorny footpaths and rugged terrain. Many a time, those from the plains not used to climbing the hills find it very difficult to continue and tend to give up the effort. But on reaching the peak of the hillock, which is about 1,000 feet high, everyone finds the effort worthwhile. One is suddenly exposed to the infinitude of the ocean in 3 directions of south, east, and west. For an angle of 270 degrees. On the northern side, one can see the other hills after this initial shock of exposure to something which is infinite. When one goes into the details, one can clearly make out the corner of this great country as one sees on the map. 2 seas, the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, and the Indian Ocean, can be made out quite distinctly through the different colors. The wind blowing incessantly soothes the tired body, bringing the coastal fragrance, which also may be the reason for its name. There are only 1 or 2 caves on top of this hill, which are occupied by some wandering seekers on a temporary basis. Sometimes they are empty. There is no physical comfort or convenience on the hill unless one wants to stay on top for spiritual practices. There are no other attractions. Invariably, whoever goes on top finds it very easy to come down the hill. This experience is also quite common on a much subtler level for the seekers. Life of Vishwamitra serves as a good example to explain this. Many stories are available on him in the Puranas, and the glimpses of his achievements can be found in the Vedic mantras. He has been called as the mantra drishta of the famous Gayatri. But unfortunately, most of us know only the infamous episodes of his life. His greed for the divine cow Nandini and his subsequent hostility towards sage Vasishta, his fall for the heavenly nymph Menaka, his unreasonable attitude towards King Harishchandra, or his extremely volatile temper. These incidents are very strong warnings for the seekers to illustrate that the path of spirituality is very slippery. One can fall any moment if one is not careful. In fact, one can never be over careful. Once on a street of the temple town of Madurai, Tamil Nadu, an aged sannyasi was walking. A shopkeeper touched his feet in reverence and asked him a funny question. A donkey was standing nearby. Pointing to it, he asked the sannyasin to tell him which of the two, the beard and the tuft of the donkey's tail, were superior. The old monk looked at his own beard, the tuft of the donkey's tail, and said, that it is difficult to reply the question and walked away. After many years, a youthful monk came to the shopkeeper and urged him to accompany him as his master was lying on his deathbed, who wanted to see him. When both of them reached a hut, they saw recognition in the eyes of the old monk, who said that only then he had been able to reply the question. The shopkeeper had almost forgotten. Reminding him of the question, the monk said that his beard was definitely superior to the tuft of the donkey's tail. The surprised shopkeeper commented that the reply could have been given even at that time when the question was asked. The old man said earnestly that it was many years back and he could have fallen from the path he had chosen. Had it been so, then the tuft of the donkey's tail would have been superior. But now there was no time for him to slip, as he had come to the last breaths of his life. Saying this, the monk left his body. Thus, the example of Vishwamitra serves as a warning. But we should also remember the power of determination and perseverance of sage Vishwamitra, which made him give up his kingdom and royal comforts to choose the life of an ascetic and stick to it. The grit and enterprise making it possible for him to create new Swarga, heaven for King Trishanku, his infinite love and compassion making him choose the name Vishwamitra, which means friend of the universe, and his contribution of sacred Gayatri Mantra having the power to transform anyone into a Brahmana, one who is treading the path of Brahman. Normally, we are unable to appreciate the positive qualities and exaggerate only the negativities because mind, as such, thrives only on that which is not, instead of dwelling on that which is. When the habit of dwelling on and the subsequent brooding and worrying about things not available continues and becomes a burden, we tend to become negative and cynical in our approach to life. One very important thing which a seeker has to remember is such cynicism invariably becomes a hurdle in spirituality. There is a great classic in Kannada language entitled Mahabrahmana, written by Devudu, giving a very positive side of the great sage Vishwamitra. This sage is one among the Sapta Rishis, the 7 sages of this Manvantara, the day of Brahma, the creator. In the classic, the author narrates the way in which greed for Nandini, the divine cow, gets transformed into an aspiration. The anger on sage Vasishta, who has the cow and who refuses to part from it, gets transformed into a quiet determination to emulate him and become a Brahmarshi. But most of all, the explanation of the Menaka episode given in the book can form a good introduction for this episode entitled Sthiti Prakarana. Sri Devudu, the author, writes that for achieving one's goal, one requires the willpower. Greater the goal, greater the willpower. Vishwamitra had only to achieve Brahmatva for himself. But he had to become instrumental in helping others to achieve it. This willpower is directly proportional to the ahankara. Sri Devudu says that the I-ness crystallizes with bhoga or experiences in general and sense indulgence in particular. At that time, Vishwamitra had to increase his willpower or the crystallized I very fast, and that was possible only with the indulgence in some heavenly pleasure. That is why the episode of Menaka, the heavenly nymph, was necessary. In this sense, it was not really a fall. It's not necessary that everyone has to agree with the opinion of the author, but one cannot possibly ignore certain facts. For example, A person does not have anything, he has neither material wealth nor any other achievements. He cannot renounce anything. What can a pauper give up? A rich man can give up his riches, a king his kingdom, or a famous man his name and fame. And if a poor man claims that he is giving up, mostly what is given up is the effort and to move towards lethargy, unless he is fully aware of the uselessness of material things, including name and fame. A seeker has to totally avoid moving towards tamas, ignorance, and lethargy. It has been pointed out in the last episode that the origin of duality and hence the multiplicity and the universe is ahankara. So all the paths either directly or indirectly recommend the annihilation of this ego. Broadly, there can be achieved in two ways. The first one is to directly annihilate it. The second one is to make it so powerful that the power itself helps the process of its own annihilation. Sri Ramakrishna used to give a very beautiful simile clarifying this point. The fish entrapped in the net of the fisherman can escape in two ways. One, by reducing itself to the extent that even the mesh of the net is big enough for it to escape. And the second, by increasing its size to such an extent that the net is no longer sufficient to contain the fish. The first path is the path of bhakti, and the second is the path of jnana. Since Yoga Vasishta is a jnana shastra, it recommends the second method. Moreover, once having involved with the ahankara and its other grosser manifestations, if we allow them to grow, ripen, and fall on their own, not unlike the harvesting of fruits, the transformation is total and irreversible. If one starts negating the ego and its manifestation without allowing them to ripen, a remanifestation is likely. Present episode entitled Sthiti Prakarana gives the nature of sustenance of the mental manifestations. It proves beyond any doubt that the universe as such is created by the reality. Having been created is preserved in the reality, and having been preserved, it once again merges in the reality. As the Taittiriya Upanishad says, Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat prayantyabhisam vishanti. And while explaining so, gives valuable hints to seekers for buffering the effects of involvement and indulgence. In all, there are 5 stories in this prakarana, each with a practical hint or two. One of the most enigmatic questions that keeps pestering our minds is, why, in spite of one's being good, one has to suffer? In other words, why does one suffer without any apparent reason? Vedanta says that none else but the victim is responsible for the experience he or she is undergoing. Many, if not most of the times, we are tempted to make others responsible for our present condition. If it's miserable, and paradoxically, we take the credit for our success stories. That is, I succeed due to my effort, while I fall due to others' faults. The most important point which a seeker does well to remember is that he must learn to take all responsibility for all her or his actions. There is a beautiful thought which sums up all this. Every person, all the events of your life are there because you have drawn them there. What you choose to do with them is up to you. This is from Illusions by Richard Bach. This way, the tendency to blame others, or to complain and grumble about the events, or being in a mood of helplessness gets eliminated, which happens to be the most obstinate of the hurdles in even ordinary life, not to mention the life divine, wherein every step and every thought is important. This means that when one takes to the life of seeking, one has to transform the somnambulistic life into an enlightened life characterized by total awareness of all actions, including thinking. That is why the act of accepting the events and persons as they are is the fundamental and mandatory step towards the quest divine. This prakarana begins with a statement from Vasishtha, which says that the picture of the universe appears first as the reflection on the stainless screen of Chidakasha, very much like the objects seen by a dreamer on his mental screen. When one is able to attain the attitude of Sakshi, witness, to this manifestation, one attains the state of Atmajnana, full, immaculate, and all-pervading. It is like a mirror which remains unaffected while reflecting the image of any object. The difference between the mirror and the Brahman is that while the object reflected by the mirror is separate from the mirror, everything, the object as well as the image, are parts of the same Brahman. There is nothing which is essentially other than Brahman. The present Sarga illustrates this fact through the story of Shukra. Once, Muni Bhragu was engaged in tapas on the slopes of lofty Mandara mountain. His son, Shukra, was intelligent and had an aura of spirituality. Shukra, being a constant companion of his father, was in intermediate and neutral state between Chit, consciousness, and Achit, matter. Like King Trishanku, who was in the middle plane between the earth and the heaven. Shukra thus was neither able to go higher nor to come lower down to the material plane. Sage Bhragu, on the contrary, was in the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Son Shukra, sitting by the side of his father, looked up through the pure Akasha and beheld a Deva lady there. He got sensually attracted to her form and became enamored. Closing his eyelids, he travelled in the vast regions of the mind to know about the level of her existence. Through his overpowering desire for her, he discovered that she belonged to Devaloka. The moment he resolved to go there, he reached the plain and came face to face with Devendra, the king of gods. While living the life of luxury there, Shukra saw the lady in a group of damsels, and then through his sankalpa he created darkness and spent a long time in the company and sensual enjoyment with the lady. Shukra then descended to Bhuloka, the earth, from Devaloka, fearing that the fruits of his noble action had been wasted. And during the descent, he forgot all about the reality. His jiva got mingled with the moonbeams and then into dew, which descended on a paddy field and got converted to paddy. The rice in the fertile stalks was cooked and eaten by a Brahmin of Dasharana country and was converted to the seminal fluid. Shukra thus, in the form of sperm, ultimately emerged as the sun through the womb of Brahmin's spouse. Associating with other seekers, he performed austere tapas over a long period. In this forest, he once again became a victim of Ajnana and had a human offspring through a deer. And getting attached to it, he fell from the state he had achieved and got involved with the material world, passing through many incarnations by subjecting himself to a series of births and deaths generated by the vasanas. He finally incarnated in the body of a tapasvin and a son of a Muni on the bank of holy Ganga. After narrating the journey of Shukra's jiva, Sage Vasishta started telling about the body of the son of Sage Bhrigu, which was lying by the side of his father, and the life had departed from it. The rays of the sun, aided by the wind, had reduced it to a mere skeleton. Having spent many years in the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Sage Bhrigu opened his eyes to behold the shriveled body of his son. The father in the Muni got disturbed at the sorry plight of his son and began cursing Yama, the god of death, who he thought was responsible for this condition. Yama appeared before him. Yama suggested the sage not to misuse the power of his tapas over anger, as nothing could destroy him, since he was only doing what is required of him by the laws of nature. The Lord of Death said that the son alone was responsible for his sorry condition, and went on to explain what really had happened, including the details of numerous births. Yama continued that in the present birth, Shukra had attained mastery over his senses and mind and was engaged in intense tapas. The Lord of Death added that it is the Atman alone, that is mind, and the acts of the mind and not the bodily acts are alone true acts. Through its life in the world, Atman is called Jiva. It is called Buddhi through its certainty of knowledge. It is called Ahankara when the conceptions of I and mine assert themselves with the signs of anger, greed, lust, etc. Yama concluded by saying that if the Muni wished to know more about the series of his son's lives in dream, all he had to do was to use the divine vision. When Sage Bhrigu was convinced of the facts, he apologized for his irrational anger towards Yama. The god of death then led the sage to the bank of Ganga, and the sage saw his son in the state of Samadhi, passing under the name Vasudeva. Coming out of his Samadhi, Vasudeva beheld these persons and sought their blessings. Sage Bhrigu blessed him to attain Atmajnana, and Vasudeva saw all his past births through Jnana vision and was freed of future births. After understanding what had happened, he remarked in wonder that the strange delusion called Prakriti had transformed into universe in his own mind. Having seen all that is to be seen, and knowing all that is to be known, he had been released from the pain incidental to rebirths. After this, the three reached the Mandara hills and saw the body of Bhargava. Kala, the Lord of Death, asked Vasudeva to enter the body like a king in his city and then administer the duties of the Guru of Asuras or demons. When Vasudeva did so, Bhrigu, his father, nourished and purified the body through his power. Concluding this story, Sage Vasishta said that this is how both son and the father annihilated the impure mind, which is the real enemy, to pass their days in the state of Jivan Mukti. If one is not careful, it is quite likely that the above story may get reduced to a mere fantasy. That is why one has to analyze the small hints given intermittently. Comparison of Shukra's state to that of Trishanku, his inability to go higher up and to come lower down, is only symbolic. A seeker passes through a neutral state which is in between the two consecutive states. At such times, there is a possibility of stagnation, and invariably such a state causes unrest and fluctuations. Normally, the fluctuations which come across our day-to-day life are distracting and disturbing, but the fluctuations experienced during the periods of stagnation are helpful for going to subtler planes. An illustration may prove helpful. When a spaceship has to negotiate the interplanetary distances, it has to overcome the gravity exerted by the planets, which keeps the spaceship in their gravity belts. The space scientists have devised an ingenious way to overcome this problem. When the spacecraft is to be launched, it requires a very large thrust or force to escape from the atmosphere and the gravity of the Earth. At the same time, the weight of the spacecraft is to be minimal, restricting their choice to the rocket engines. They achieve this feat by the principle called as slingshot effect. The spaceship is launched and allowed to escape the atmosphere by firing of powerful jet engines. Then the spacecraft is made to revolve around the Earth twice or thrice so it gains sufficient momentum, that is, force due to mass and the velocity. A slight change in the angle of the trajectory helps the spacecraft to escape the Earth's gravity. That is, the spaceship makes use of the gravity itself to escape from the clutches of the planet's gravity. Through Shukra, sage Vasishtha tries to give an indirect hint that during the moments of stagnation, the fluctuation can be used to go to deeper levels, but one has to have infinite caution, else it is quite likely that the seeker may go to the grosser level, like a small mistake in the angle may make the spaceship into a satellite of the planet. Involvement in Chittakasha, the mental plane, is the primary fluctuation that has been called as Sankalpa, which can help the seeker to ascend to Jnanakasha as a springboard. But if one is not careful and loses the awareness, then one descends to the gross material plane, which has been called in this scripture as Bhutakasha. In the description of Shukra's descent given in this sarga, the author mentions the moonbeams, dew, paddy, and other things. These are all symbols which represent the various stages of the descent. Each birth creates new vasanas or tendencies which can become causal to the subsequent births. In spite of the intensification of vasanas through repeated births, Pratyagatma, the inner being, keeps remembering its ideal state, characterized by total freedom and absolute bliss. This is why, on obtaining sufficient experiences, an aspiration starts steadily taking over the lower vasanas. One of the surest signs of this process is the feeling of general discontent in man in spite of fulfilling the goals set by him, and the nagging question that follows after each achievement, is this all? The aspiration to get back to the original state is like the persistence and perseverance of the sprout in the seed, which manages to break the ground open to bloom into a sapling. How this sapling of aspiration is nurtured depends on the individual. According to this scripture, the most important step a seeker takes in the right direction is by assuming the responsibility for all the events in his life and all his actions. With this, the mood of complaining about life ceases. When Carlos Castaneda was in a complaining mood, Don Juan, his teacher, gave him a wonderful analysis of the habit of complaining with the following words. When a man decides to do something, he must go all the way, he said. But he must take responsibility for what he does. No matter what he does, he must know first what he is doing, and then he must proceed with his actions without having any doubts or remorse about them. I protested that it was all an impossibility because there was no way to avoid doubts and remorse. Of course there is a way, he replied with conviction. I have no doubts or remorse. Everything I do is my decision and my responsibility. The simplest thing I do, may well mean my death. Death is stalking me. Therefore, I have no room for doubts and remorse. You, on the other hand, feel that you are immortal, and the decisions of an immortal man can be cancelled or regretted or doubted. In a world where death is the hunter, my friend, there is no time for regrets or doubts. There is only time for decisions. You are complaining, he said softly. You have been complaining all your life because you don't assume responsibility for your decisions. If you would have assumed responsibility, you would not have any complaint. To assume responsibility for one's decision means that one is ready to die for them. It does not matter what the decision is, he said. Nothing could be more or less serious than anything else. Don't you see? In a world where death is the hunter, there is no small or big decisions. There are only decisions that we make in the face of inevitable death. While Don Juan is quite plain and direct in his use of words as he takes the help of death, Yoga Vasishta is indirect in its approach in giving the same advice. Manas, Buddhi and Ahankara are also transient, and the fall and the consequent suffering is the outcome of one's own sankalpa. This scripture assures every seeker that it is very much within one's power to retrace the steps and be with oneself. Another important, very important point this sarga stresses is that one gets easily attached to one's own creation and manifestation. This is illustrated by the outburst of anger in sage Bhrigu on seeing his son's lifeless body. This is noticed in every one of us. We get attached to our children, be they be human or mental children in the form of things of creativity. It is the experience of those who love to climb mountains that it is quite strenuous to climb, but not so much to come down. Climbing small hills like Marutomale may not demand so much of effort, but it is the experience of almost everyone that while coming down there is absolutely no effort and the path seems to be so familiar while doing so. Similarly, if not in a more intense sense, treading the path of spirituality demands all the sincerity and perseverance, and invariably the fall comes due to the involvement at the psychic level and the indulgence at the sense and body level. Kathopanishad says, Kshurasya dhara nishita duratyaya durgam patas tat kavayo vadanti. The experienced wise say that the path of spirituality is tough and dangerous as walking on the razor's edge. Perhaps it is only due to this inherent danger and challenge. A seeker loves to tread this path, not unlike the adventurers responding to the challenges nature has for them on the mountain peaks, or in the depths of the ocean, or even in the infinity of space.